The happiest place on earth? Well, it is until you pass away. Stay tuned and find out.
Are you ready for true tales from a real undertaker? Everything from strange situations to crazy paranormal experiences. For over 20 years, Mark Tofson was a funeral director and embalmer working everywhere from California to Japan. Get set to hear about his hauntingly crazy adventures.
I'm here to share my personal experiences with you. I notice there are a lot of funeral director and embalmer channels on here. Most of them deal with either telling you how embalming is done or something like that, uh, or else they talk about news items like grave robberies is the recent one. There's two female uh, funeral directors on here whose channel I really enjoy, Lauren the Mortician, and I think her name's Caitlin Doherty. Both of those channels are really great, and I enjoy watching those. But I thought it was good to have a channel where somebody just talked about their personal experiences, and mine were pretty crazy. So today I'm going to talk about deaths that happen around Disneyland. I'm not going to talk about the actual deaths in Disneyland. There's plenty of channels on here that have videos about that. Uh, I just was surprised when I worked for the Orange County coroner in California how many people passed away in the hotels that surrounded Disneyland. Uh, I found so many people in there, and a lot of them died from medical conditions, but of course there were some homicides and people who unalived themselves. Today I'm going to tell you about three that kind of stuck with me. They're sad ones. Uh, the first one was a family of five. They had come from Colorado, so they drove quite a ways. They were staying there, and mom and dad took the kids to the park, and they had a great day. Riding the rides, eating. When they came home that night, dad went to bed. He said he wasn't feeling good and went to bed. They had planned to go the next day again. Uh, Problem was dad didn't wake up the next morning. So when I got there, the EMTs had already been there. He still had an IV in his arm, and he had those taped on sensors for your heart still on. We weren't allowed to take those off because the pathologist needed to look at that and see what they did. Uh, so the wife and the kids were, of course, outside, and we put the gentleman into the body bag and then close it up with the IVs and everything. Uh, while we were in there doing that, I could overhear the lady crying and talking to the officer, telling him about she didn't know how she was going to get home because she wasn't a good driver and it was too far away for her to drive. The officer was explaining to her that maybe they could fly back and figure out how to get the car, have it towed, or have it put it on one of those transports and ship back. Uh, the lady decided she was going to call her brother-in-law and have him drive them all back. Uh, Her biggest problem was that she didn't know how she was going to explain this to him and his parents. Uh, but it really tore my heart out because the wife and kids were just really upset. And I imagine after having such a great day, it's just the biggest heartbreaking letdown you can have. Uh, the second one was even more heartbreaking to me. Uh, she was a real pretty girl, probably about 25. Uh, she loved Disney all her life, I found out. Uh, Loved the movies. Uh, she had been engaged to be married, and the fiance decided to call it off. And of course, she was heartbroken. The family tried to console her, but she said she needed some time alone. She wanted to go to Disneyland, and the family thought, well, maybe that'll take her mind off it. So the family actually paid for her to go. I'm not sure where she was from. She flew in, as far as I knew. Uh, Anyhow, we had found the ticket that showed she'd actually gone the day before. Uh, had a good time, I imagine. And then when she came back, she decided to unalive herself by uh, hanging herself from the coat rack in the closet with a belt. Uh, a lot of people ask me, how can you do this? Coat rack really doesn't hold much weight, but she was really tiny. She was probably maybe 110 pounds. Uh, and people say, well, of course it's too short. Well, your feet are touching the ground. Well, you'd be surprised. People can do anything they want to do if they got a mindset to it. I've seen people do it off of doorknobs, off the ground. Um, so, anyways, this poor lady decided that, this guy was worth unaliving herself over. And the saddest part was we had to listen to the phone call while they were calling the parents. And the parents just, they didn't handle it well at all, of course. Uh, they were trying to figure out how to take care of her being so far away. Uh, in that case, where you pass away far away, if you want to have the actual person back there for a viewing, you're going to have them embalmed where they passed away at. The airlines require embalming for you to ship a body on the plane. Uh, but yeah, it really bothered me that this poor girl would go to this extent over some guy, and I'm sure he wasn't worth it. And I'm sure if she would have just went on with her life, she would have found somebody much better. So that really, really bothered me for a while. The third story is sad and just horrible at the same time. Uh, Man took his family there. I believe they were from Utah. Uh, took took them to the park. They went there for one whole day. They were staying at the Disneyland hotel next door. Uh, he, I guess they bought multi-day passes, and so they went the next day. Well, probably halfway through the day, maybe afternoon, the father decided that he was tired. He was going to go back to the hotel. Well, the mom and the kids, they didn't want to go, so they decided, okay, well, you go ahead and we'll meet you up later for dinner. Well, where I picked them up was not the Disneyland Hotel. Apparently, this man had went and, if you know that area, the Ball Harbor, Catella area there, the streets around there, uh, is full of prostitutes because they know that a lot of people are coming there from out of town. There's a lot of conventions there and stuff. So yeah, you'll see a lot of prostitutes. The man went and picked up a prostitute, took her to one of the cheap motels in the area there, and after they had their fun, I guess the prostitute asked him to go and get a drink for her from the vending machine. Well, to the police, this was kind of it was a red flag because they figured that she probably set him up and sent him out there. But what had happened was when he went out there, there was somebody waiting, and they robbed him and beat him to a pulp. And the guy made it back to the room and collapsed and told her, call the police, I was robbed. Well, she called the police. They came. By the time they got there, he had passed away from his injuries. Of course, it made it a homicide investigation. Uh, right away, they suspected that the prostitute was involved in some way. So they were asking her a lot of questions. Anytime we had a homicide, we were called out there and we usually waited for hours. Uh, while I was there, I was standing outside and there was a big crowd of people gathered on the top floor there, looking over the railing, seeing what was going on. Well, there was one really big man there, and he was just laughing, making jokes, and just really acting inappropriate. And some of the other people around him were kind of looking at him funny, like, what are you talking about? And I noticed this, so I was paying attention to him. Well, he made eye contact with me, and of course, when he did, all of a sudden, he got this look on his face and he turned his head real quick. And to me, it was really suspicious. Uh, so I went and told one of the detectives and I said, hey, there's a man up there. I said, I think he might have been the one that did this because he's just acting really weird. And the detective says, you know what, you're probably right because, he goes, we can't go on suspicions, but, we usually have good, our intuition's really good. So he said, you're probably correct. He probably had something to do with it. I'm not. He went and talked to the guy and interviewed him. I'm not sure what became of it. And we never usually heard about any of this stuff after we picked him up. Uh, the worst part was, before I could go in there and pick him up, they had to bring the wife down from the hotel. Uh, the reason they found out who he was he had a Disneyland hotel key in his pocket. His wallet had been taken, so he had no ID. So they had to go through the hotel to find out who the man was. And then, of course, they figured out who his wife was, and they, brought her down there to ID him. That was a really horrible situation. There was, of course, she was crying. She was mad. Uh, she was saying, how is she going to explain this to the kids, to her family, to his family? But, you need to think about these things when you do stuff like this. A lot of people, they're just thinking, hey, it's going to be, some fun. But yeah, if you get yourself into a situation like this, you might not be there to hear and see everything that goes on, but you're going to leave some people with some questions that need to be answered that they don't want to answer. So yeah, that was very sad, and just I felt so bad for that lady. But yeah, there was many people we had to pick up in that area. Usually they had some kind of a medical issue, got too overheated at the park, or had a heart problem. There was a lot of conventions where people just didn't wake up. But that whole area around there were quite a few deaths. I thank you for watching the video. Hopefully you'll give me a thumbs up. I'd like you to subscribe if you could. But yeah, keep checking back. I'll have more stories. And like I said, these are all true. They're all usually very strange. I never thought that things like this happened until I got into this business. But if you come back, I will have something more for you later. So thank you for watching. Bye.